Hey,
Awesome.
Jenny.
Hello.
It's nice to see your face. I feel like, in a normal year, I would have seen you somewhere, somehow.
Right,
This is
right.
not a normal year.
Yeah. It's going on to also another not another
Yeah.
normal year. So yeah, it's just pretty much gonna continue forever is the way that this is the new normal.
Well, I just keep calling it a year, even though we're way past a year. Like we're rounding two, but I just don't think my brain can handle that. So I'm just gonna keep calling it a year.
Yeah. When people have me sign copies of Let's Pretend This Never Happened, I always change it on the inside as I'm signing it to Let's Pretend 2020 Never Happened. And now I'm like, am I going to have to add and 20? Yeah, I'm going to have to add and 2021.
I
Okay.
know. I had such high hopes. Remember June when we got our vaccines and we were
Oh, it
like,
was so
oh,
good. We could leave the house, we could travel.
and we had like 3 weeks of thinking that maybe the rest of the world would,
Right, that we'd all get our
yeah,
vaccines, and then we'd be safe.
yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Are you,
yeah,
what's school looking like for the fall? Are you is she back in regular, stay back in regular school or?
yeah. Haley's back in regular public school, and of course, because it's Texas,
Oh
it's a
gosh.
mess. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So they actually just had last night. They had a emergency board meeting where they finally at least agreed that like maybe we should enforce masks for at least
Yeah.
a month. So that's gonna at least on Monday. But I will say that most of the kids in Haley's school, the majority of them, even though it's not required, the majority of them do wear masks.
Yeah.
So that's helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have another school that is nearby us, and they're like a year-round school, and they have so many cases and there's so many teachers that are sick. And I mean, it's practically shut down the school. So I'm like, oh, don't let that get that bad everywhere else. So
Yeah. Well, I know they're a theater kid and I have theater kids and I've been
mhm.
really impressed. Like the theater kids are like taking this really seriously.
They are, and I almost wonder if they're not just like, listen, I have to be able to sing and I have to protect my lungs and my
Totally.
voice. So yeah, part of me is like, oh, they're so smart. And then the other part of me is like, well, and also maybe they're a little selfish because they just don't want to get sick. So
Sure.
that's okay. That's all right.
Sure.
I'm okay with that selfishness.
But I feel like the theater kids are always like little social justice warriors too, right? Like, they're
Yes,
they're just down for all the causes.
exactly. Exactly.
It's so cute.
I
Well,
love it.
I was really tickled. I listened to the audiobook of your book,
Uh-huh.
Broken in Best Possible Way, and I was just so tickled at the end when you were talking about the experience of reading the audiobook in your house because that was also my experience for my book this year.
Yeah. It's completely insane. But I have to say, so it was hard. It was hard doing the initial setup, like cleaning out enough of a closet that I
Uh-huh.
can, put everything in there. And then of course, they ship you all of the equipment
Uh-huh.
and you have to install it and put it together. And I'm
Yeah.
not tech savvy. And so, I'm like on FaceTime with the director and with the tech person, and we're going through, and I'm just like, I don't know how any of this works. And there's like 82 different pieces that have to be put together, and it took hours. But aside from that, I absolutely would rather do this from now on than go into like fly into New York and do
Yeah.
the. So yeah, I sent a thing to my agent and I was like, can I continue to do audiobooks in my closet in the future? Because
Totally.
this is nice. I get to sit here and Dorothy Parker's on my lap and Hunter S. Tomcat is like, hey, what's going on? And it's nice.
I know. It was like chaotic, but then I agree it was also really nice and like it was my first experience and I was really brain dead by the end, by 5 p.m. like reading all day. I was kind of like and I was like I'm just so glad I'm at my house. Like I'm just go lay
Yes.
on my bed
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
between takes.
Yeah. It seems like it's so easy. And then about 2 hours into it, you're like, I am absolutely exhausted.
Mhm.
My throat is killing me.
Yep.
Why am I so tired?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and then I'm
It's
also like criticizing my word. Like, I'm not even making sense. This book sucks. I don't know what a word is anymore.
exactly,
Out of
exactly.
body
I'm constant.
experience. Like,
Yes.
words are coming out of my mouth, and I don't know
Yes,
what I'm saying.
yes. Stopping myself over and over again. And actually, like, more likely it was my producer stopping me and going like,
Mm.
have you ever heard that word pronounced this way? Which was such a nice way of her saying, you're saying that wrong. And it happens all the time because I read more than I talk. And
Yes.
so there are all these words that I'm like, are you sure that's how that's spread? And I'd have to go and like listen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope, you're right. Okay,
But
I'm an
I've
idiot.
only known this word in my own brain.
Yes, yes, exactly. I'm like, are you sure it's ethereal? Isn't it ethereal? Because it seems like ether, like it's out in the ether,
Yeah.
and it's
Ethereal.
real, and it's and
I don't
yeah. And
know.
then I'm
We
like,
should say it
no,
that way
okay,
because
you're
it makes
right,
more sense.
right, exactly.
Let's just change it. Well, I love this book so much. I love your writing. But this one in particular, I always say my favorite type of art, whether it's a book or a movie, is something that makes me laugh and something that makes me think. Those are the two things I want together, right? That's the magic sauce for me. And I mean, this book made me laugh. It made me cry. I mean, there was a period I was laughing about. There's a period of 2 chapters where one chapter was about like squirrel traps, your squirrel
Yes.
taking over the rat trap,
Mhm.
and then and I'm dying. I'm like crying, laughing. And then in the next chapter, you're talking about like filling the holes in our soul and, loss and friendship and codependency. And I'm like bawling. And I'm like, this is why I love Jenny Lawson. Like, we contain multitudes. Like, it's an emotional journey.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it was hard going through and figuring out like how do I place like, okay, do I do, funny serious,
Mm-hmm.
or do I, and yeah, it's a hard thing. It's almost like making it like a recipe because you want to be like, okay, well, I want to set this up, but then okay, then people need a break from this, but then can I go
Yes.
straight from, how do dogs know they have penises to, healthcare crisis? Is that going to work? Yeah, it's a, the thing about essay books is you don't think about how to put them in a proper order until all of a sudden your editor is like, so look, I can't just put these in the way that you submitted them to me.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I had the same issue with my book too because I'd have like an essay about white privilege and then like a story about changing poop, and
yes.
but I really enjoy the kind of back and forth. I like that, I liked that it was out of order, and
Yes.
that there was some time to breathe and some time to really contemplate the heavy stuff, but then in the next chapter we're laughing about, pitches.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy
Oh,
business
that pitches
pitches.
chapter. What's really funny about the pitches chapter. So if you haven't read it, there's this whole chapter about Shark Tank, the TV show, had sent me this thing and they were like, we'd like you to do some reviews and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, here's what you should do is you should have me on the show. And I came up with these like terrible pitches, like just so inappropriate with some of my friends. And the funny thing about that chapter is it had been months and months and months that I had not submitted anything to my editor. And with this book, I was in a really deep depression when I wrote a lot of it. So I was years behind on my deadline. And I started feeling really panicky about, the fact that I hadn't turned in anything in so long. And so I wrote that chapter just so that I could submit it and she could go, I appreciate you doing this, but it's not quite right. But it would like buy me time. I would be like, oh,
Yes.
okay, well, if you don't think it's good enough, and then it's back on her.
Yeah.
And instead, both she and my agent were like, this is hilarious. And I was like, but we can't actually put this in the book, right? Like this is pretty inappropriate. Like even for me, this is inappropriate. And they were like, no, it's great. It's really funny. I was like,
Oh, totally.
oh no.
It was
Oh
perfect.
no. Okay. So yeah. So that was sort of a surprise chapter for me as well.
Yeah. I love that it was just hysterical and so random in places, but then the through line really was, about mental health. And the chapter that really got me was the one about insurance, your letter to your insurance carrier. And it got me from both ends because I struggle with mental health stuff. I absolutely struggle with getting coverage, right? Like, I
Hmm.
mean, at this point, I'm in a new loop of I need a new therapist. I literally cannot find a therapist that's covered by my insurance that takes new clients. Literally
Yeah.
can't find it. Like on my to-do list today is to call and scream at my insurance that
Hmm.
they need to give me a person who has openings. Anyway, but I'm also a therapist, right? And so
Hmm.
I'm from that end, it's so terrible because so many of us have just decided I'm not going to deal with this insurance bullshit anymore. I'm just going to take
Yes.
cash because it's so demoralizing, it's so frustrating. Our hands are so tied.
Hmm.
But then it's like then I feel shitty because I'm not taking insurance and people need to use their insurance.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, my most of my doctors and my psychiatrist and therapist, and none of them take my insurance, and
Yeah.
I don't blame them because my insurance is terrible and
Yeah.
they make my life miserable.
Yeah.
And I am so lucky that I can afford to do that because a
Yeah.
lot of people can't. And so many of the treatments that I do and the medication I do, and even just basic medications like my antidepressants, is it's almost impossible to get them to cover them at all. And so I end
Yeah.
up paying, I mean, right now, and they're at least covering some of it, but I'm still paying about $100 a month
Yeah.
for just antidepressants.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it shouldn't be like that.
No,
Like,
and that's so
why?
cost prohibitive for so many people.
It is. And not only that, but then also, it's so easy when you are in a depression to say, I'm not worthy of this
Hmm.
medication.
Yeah.
And so then you stop taking it because you feel like you're taking money away from your family.
Hmm.
And then you slip further and further away. And then it becomes worse and worse. And I mean, in the long run, it's such a terrible decision for the insurance companies, for yourself, for your family. And they should want to be doing all of these things that help people in the short run so that they don't
Hmm.
have to do the really scary long run treatment, which is
Right.
also almost impossible to get. I mean, I just got finished with ketamine therapy
Hmm.
for treatment resistant depression. And it's not, I mean, I didn't even need to call my insurance. I immediately, as soon as I talked to the people, the doctor who did it, they were just like, "Yeah, you're absolutely not going to get it
Right.
covered
Like, don't
by
even
insurance."
bother.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just it shouldn't be that way.
No. I mean, it's funny because after I read your book, I was like, oh, I'm going to try TMS. Like, maybe
Mhm.
this will work for me.
Right.
And, called. And of course, immediately they're like, yeah, this will be out of
Right.
pocket.
It is so insane. And the thing is that if you fight enough for it, I would say 60% of the time they will eventually bend and say like, okay, well, will at least, count it toward your deductible, or we'll at least do this or that. But I know that it's going to take at least a full 8 to 12 hours of me
Mhm.
fighting for this one
Yeah.
particular thing. And it's going to take at least 5 hours of my doctor's time too. And
Yes.
for a lot of doctors, they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we can't do that. We cannot afford to spend that time. And we already know that we're going to have to go. And so the insurance companies, they know most people are going to give up.
Well, one thing that I figured out pretty quickly as a therapist is there are certain insurance companies that will just deny every claim on the first try because they think you'll give up. Like that is just a
Absolutely.
standard practice is they just bump it right back to you. And it is frustrating, You're trying to keep track of all this and you do give up. Like I have not gotten reimbursed and not asked for it of the client. There's, for lots of clients where I'm just like, I guess I was just free because I
Right.
don't want to deal with their insurance. you know?
Exactly. Yes, yes. Well, and
Forget
even,
it. Never
I have,
mind.
yes, I have what is it called? A healthcare savings account thing where
Uh-huh.
I put my own money in, and then, I can use that to pay for stuff that other things don't cost, other things don't cover. And so when I started doing ketamine, I was like, well, at least I can use that because that's my own money that I've put in. And I went in, and of course, they were like, "Oh yeah, this card doesn't work," and then we talked to the people at the insurance, and they were like, well, "Yeah, it takes 5 days before that card is actually works." I'm like, "Okay, well that doesn't make any sense, but whatever." And then 5 days later, when I have my next treatment, I go in, and they're like, "Yeah, it's still not working." And then we call, and they're like, "Oh, but you have to actually physically move it over onto the card from your account." I'm like, "Why would you? I mean, what is the point of having a card if it's not already?" So then we do. And then we come back 5 days later for the next one. And they're like, "Yeah, still not working. Still going to have to pay cash." And then we call them where they're like, "Oh, yeah, it can take like, 5 to 10 days before we move that from your account." So that, oh my God, we were to the end of my treatment.
Yeah.
And luckily, we had money in the bank, though. I could just be like, "All right, well, I guess that's another $200 that I'm paying today that I was not expecting." But not everybody can do that, and
Yeah.
they just want you to give up. It
I mean,
sucks.
it's like being in a relationship with an abusive boyfriend, right? Like
It
you're being
absolutely
gaslit,
is.
they're
Yep.
crazy making, they're
Mm-hmm.
smoke and mirrors. Like it's literally all the hallmarks of just a totally toxic relationship.
It absolutely is. I do think that it is starting to get a little bit better just because I think people are starting to read the press and people are starting to become more aware and are getting more angry and understand that that they may have to do, 3 or 4 different oh my gosh, what is it called? I've done so many of them. You think that you would remember when you go in and you do like the retrial of,
Yeah.
let me submit it again, and let me
Yep.
submit it again, and let me submit it again. And that at a certain point, the insurance company goes, "Oh, actually, we are losing money because we're having to pay every time to deal with this."
Yeah.
So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe it's going to get better.
I know. I hope so. I hope so. I loved in your book, you described anxiety so well and just the experience of our brains sort of playing tricks on us, right? And I think it's so interesting and normalizing for me to read your work on it because I feel like we get so many messages that tell us like trust your gut or like, go with your own feelings and I'm like, if I did that, it would not work out very well.
Right.
Like I literally
Exactly.
can't trust my gut.
100%. My gut is telling me run all the time.
Yeah.
Like run
Totally.
away and pee while you're running because that'll make you
Yes.
lighter. Yeah, yeah. My lizard brain is the one
Hmm.
that is in charge, and I
Yep.
have to constantly be like, "Okay, well, depression is lying to me, so I can't believe any of this stuff. My anxiety is overreacting." And yeah, so finding those tools of what helps has been it's a really hard learning experience. And what's both wonderful and terrible is that I think everybody creates their own toolbox of,
Hmm.
like, here are the things that work for me. And, sometimes it's medication, and sometimes it's meditation, and sometimes it's, like, envisioning certain things. And I have all sorts of tools that I think probably if I talk to somebody who doesn't have mental illness, they would look and go, "That's crazy."
Yeah.
And it is, but guess what? So am I. So that works. Um, but what I think is really interesting is how often I will talk to people who also have similar issues, and I'll be like, "So what's worked for you?" And you share those
Yeah.
things of like, here's some envisioning things that work for me, and here's some things that don't work for me, and all of a sudden you find somebody who has the same tools, and you're like, "What?" Like, so one of the things that for me, and this sounds absolutely ridiculous because I have such bad anxiety disorder, but one of the things that is most calming to me is watching horror movies and reading scary books. And you would think that that would be just the opposite, that that would be like, putting it into overdrive. But instead, for me, because I'm always feeling this terror and dread, and it doesn't match what's going on in my life, there's that
Yes.
cognitive dissonance that's going like, why do
Yes.
I feel like this? This is not right. But if I have like a horror movie going on in the background while I'm working on something, then it's like, oh, that this makes sense because it's
Hmm.
because there's some chainsaws going on in the background, and there's human centipede and whatever. Also, don't watch Human Centipede. You should not watch it. It's terrible.
Okay.
But you have to find. But there are some other people who would be like, that would be the last thing
Yeah.
I would never sleep
Yeah.
again. So finding those things are really important, and in a way that's really helpful too with finding treatment for my depression. I have treatment resistant depression, so I've gone through so many different medications and treatments, and it is very easy to feel like if one doesn't work for you, that you failed the treatment, and instead being able to change your thinking and be like, no, that treatment failed me, and that's okay. Like it just means you go
Yeah.
on to the next one.
Yeah.
If chemotherapy doesn't work for one cancer patient, and then the
Right.
doctor's like, okay, we need to move to surgery, you don't go like, I failed chemotherapy. You just go like, oh, that sucks, that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
We move on to the next thing. But it's so much harder, I think, for us to do that with something that is mental, because it feels so hidden, and people
Uh-huh.
can't look at you and see and be like, oh, you're clearly ill.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's harder.
And I have the experience too where I present pretty well because I can go very clinical. And
Mhm.
so even in therapy or, with a psychiatrist, like they'll be like, "Well, yeah, I mean, but you don't seem like it's that bad." And I'm like, "No, no, like my in my brain it's so bad. Like I know I'm here dressed with my hair done, but like up here it's really bad.
Yes.
Like
Well,
I don't know how to express to you how cuckoo it is up here."
exactly. And I'm also like, I'm a people pleaser. And so
Yes.
I almost feel like I have to like be like, everything's okay,
Oh,
even
totally.
with my, my therapist and my doctors. And actually, so the second time that I had ketamine treatment, and it's like they give you these injections of these psychedelic drugs, and um the particular place that I go to, they don't give you these anti-anxiety drugs that a lot of the other ones do, because they're like, disassociation can be helpful, and so it's
Hmm.
okay if you, but it can be uncomfortable, let us know. And so I disassociated and ended up in this like existential dread hole.
Yeah.
And what I should have done, what I'm supposed to do, is I'm supposed to hit the button and say, hi, my mind just went to a bad place, I feel
Right.
scared. But of course I didn't, because I was like, I'm the people I'm like,
Yeah.
everything's
I'm going
great,
to be
it's
a
all
good
fine.
patient. I'm
Exactly. Yes. I'm not going to cause trouble. I don't want to
totally.
disturb anyone. And so it wasn't until I came back the next time that I was like, so I had kind of like not a great time last time. And I kind of felt like I was stuck in time. And they were like, why didn't you tell us? I was like, well, I don't know. And they were like, okay, well, we have an easy solution to that. We can give you this other medication that'll help. And it totally did. But I was so like, I don't want to bother anyone, that I'm just like, well, I'll just die instead. It's
Totally.
okay. Don't worry. I'll step over my body. It's fine. I don't know. I don't know if it's just a woman thing, or if it's just a people pleaser thing. I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm just like, okay, we have got to stop being so dang polite,
I
and stand
know.
up for ourselves sometimes and be our own agents.
But I think I mean, you have modeled that for me really well because I know like even at some of the conferences that we'll be at together, like you have rock solid boundaries. You have figured out a way. I remember I think the first time I met you, it was like a meet and greet booth. Like you created a booth for yourself. Am I remembering that right? At like Blog Her
Sort of,
2007 or
yes.
something?
Yeah. So what happened is, in the past, whenever I would have, because I would do the people's party, because there would always be these parties, and there were like these special parties that only the
Yes.
fancy people got invited to.
Yes.
And I, first of all, I hated those, and I never got invited to them. So myself and several other people, we were like, let's just do a people's party where everybody gets to come,
Yeah.
and this will just be fun. And but I had too much anxiety, and I was like, but I can't come. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang out in the bathroom the entire time. And so I did. And that became the thing of like, oh, have you seen Jenny? She's in the bathroom. And so we ended up having these great parties in the bathroom.
Yes.
And then at a certain blogger, because the people's party got like bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I think blogger was like, we need to sort of sponsor this and like, make it. And we were like, yeah, we don't really want to give it up because we just don't do it. Like, we don't make any money. We don't want sponsors. It's just, and they were like, no, we'll do it. And we'll make there'll be a special bathroom just for Jenny. And so they built me this like booth, and it had like a toilet, and it was so sweet. But the whole point of the bathroom is that you can easily escape from it. And they put it in this corner, like and it ended up being like exactly the opposite. It was so they trapped you in a terrifying corner. They trapped me in the corner with a toilet, and like, thank God, like Laura Mays was there. And so she would stand there next to me, and she would be like, you okay? You okay? Do you need to hide somewhere? And I'd be like, I need to hide somewhere. And we'd like hide under a table. And then I would come back out again, and I'd be like, I'm okay. And then I go hide again. But what's really nice is that not only do people typically understand it, or if they don't understand it, they go, well, that's weird, but okay, whatever. But more importantly, it gives other people permission to say, I have boundaries too. And oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's like, okay, well, if I show up to a party for 5 minutes and leave, does that make me a loser? And instead they're like, oh, there's tons of people who only show up for 5 minutes and leave. Like, that's okay. That's acceptable. Like, that's a 5-minute win because most of us are hiding in the room the entire time. So yeah. Once all that pretense is down, all of a sudden you can start to go like, oh, it turns out we're all human.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to do, especially as a public person, like, because I'm sure your desire would be meet everybody, right? Like have a moment of connection with everybody. Like that's totally my desire. Mm-hmm. But can my brain do that? No. Or I try, exactly. I remember I spoke at something, I can't even remember what I spoke at. And then it was like one of those situations where I then kind of mulled out, and then a line formed, and then the line was really long. And then I was having one-on-one conversations for like an hour. Mm-hmm. And of course, no boundaries, because people, you want to talk to people, but I remember getting sick because my anxiety and IBS are like connected. I remember getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And then, but I had no boundaries. And then when it was finally over, I walked outside and threw up in the grass. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, none of those people want me to throw up, like I can just advocate for myself.
Yes. Yeah. Same with, on book tour, like my favorite part is, afterward in the line, and I get to talk to people, and it's so fantastic, but it is also so emotionally draining that I can't do anything else the entire time that everywhere that I go. I never get to see anything of the city or anything because I'm like, I'm going to be sick the entire next day. Mm-hmm. And it's totally worth it. Like it absolutely is totally worth it. But I have such envy for the people who were like, oh, last night I went to a party. It was really great. You want to meet for brunch? I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. You were able to do something at night and then you want to do something the next day. Like, how is that? That's like doing 3 triathlons in a row. Like, I don't understand it. But what's really nice is, and that I missed about this year because I didn't get to do a book tour is, I would always see people in line who had like the same eyes as me, and they would have the same panicky, like, I don't know what to say, and I want to run away. And I could see them like from a distance. Yeah. And I would tell the people that I was with, and actually Victor, when he travels with me, he's so good about this because he recognizes it too. And so he would see those people and would go to them in line and be like, hey, do you want to just come up to the front real quick? And he would just be like, hey, Jenny, do you want to grab a Coke real quick on the other side? And I would be like, yes, I do. And I could like sneak over and just like give them a hug real quick and be like, I get it. I can tell you need to go. It's all right. Let me sign your book. I love you, and so I don't know. I kind of missed that I didn't get to do that.
Yeah.
But what was also really nice is this is the first time that like my whole book tour was virtual.
Yeah.
And there were so many people who were like, I've never been able to go to a book
Yeah.
tour because my anxiety is too strong. And
Yeah.
it never dawned on me before to have a virtual book tour.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, of course, from now on, I will always have at least one
Yeah.
virtual stop. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, and I loved you talked about that in your kind of epilogue, how, the pandemic like allowed you to have a one-on-one with Ali Brosh that people got to watch that probably wouldn't have happened in real life, right? And
Never. Yeah, I never, I mean, we're like best friends in our imaginations, but our anxiety and our introversion is so high that we don't email each other, we don't text each other, we don't have we're very sort of hidden. And yeah, it was the first time ever that I was able to talk to her in real life. And she was in her, blanket fort, and I was hidden in my office, and it was fantastic. And then as soon as it was done, we never talked to each other again. But we still, like, even when we were talking, we were like, she was like, we have these imaginary trips that we go on, you and I. And I was like, oh my God, we totally have those imaginary trips. Oh my. So yeah. There's so many things that actually, I mean, COVID completely sucks. And, I don't recommend it. And my grandmother died of it. And it was an awful thing, but there were a lot of wonderful silver lining that kind of came with that, including the fact that there were so many things that I was asked to do that before I never could have done. Like I did, like the Mayo Clinic does this invisible disabilities speaking thing, and they'd asked me to do it. And I was like, I can't because my invisible disability is I have anxiety.
Right.
Not good at traveling. And this last year, they were like, well, we're going to do it virtually. And so I was suddenly able to do, and there were so many things that I think opened up for so many people who can't, for some reason or another, easily leave their house. And I hope that we continue that like open-mindedness of saying, you know what, the rules don't have to be quite as strong. We actually can make some changes. And I think we can learn a lot from this if we're prepared to.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like you, it's like, I know, that this has had horrible consequences for people. But at the same time, it's like, it's also brought some really beautiful stuff. I mean, people are able to work from home that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And, just a lot of things that have, I think been helpful for all kinds of people, whether it's disability, parenting, tons of aspects that have been helped by our forced, we all had to become our own tech people. And, whoever thought that we'd be like recording our audiobooks from our homes.
I mean, there's just so many things that we were just like, oh no, you can't. I mean, you just can't.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, actually, if we have to, we can.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe the rules are not quite so quick after all.
I'm just really hoping that we abolish meetings after this. Like, can we just all agree it never needed to be a meeting? It could have been an email the whole time.
Yes, it never needed to be a meeting. Also, handshakes. I think all handshakes should just go away. Instead, it should just be, you just wave. You just go like, hi, and then that's it. Like, I'm a hugger and I totally get it, but I get nothing out of handshakes. There's nothing of like, let me touch your hand. Oh, now you're real. Who cares?
It's so weird. What a weird tradition. It really is strange. It's so strange.
It is so strange, right? Yeah. Wave, bow. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we can acknowledge people without having to say like, let me touch the inside of your palm. All right, now you're okay.
Your sweaty palm. I loved also in your epilogue when you said that, like, for a person who is both introverted and has anxiety, like, we've been preparing for this quarantine our whole lives. Like we were like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
let's
this
go.
is our marathon.
Totally.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I had so many friends who would reach out and they would be like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, you know what? I've been doing this forever. I
Yeah,
will help you through it. It's
totally.
okay. Like you're going to be all right. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I think too, I mean, as you mentioned, I do the same thing too, where I'm in a constant state of fight or flight. So whether or not I have a crisis, I always have a crisis, right? My brain is ready to create a
Yes.
crisis, like
Yes.
ready for a catastrophe at any moment. If there's not one available, I'll noodle. I'll find something. I'll find some thread to pull. I'll find a physical
Uh-huh.
symptom, like, you know. And so it
Mhm.
was weirdly calming when there was like an actual crisis. Like, okay, kind of like
Yes.
your horror movies.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. And
okay,
then
there's an external
exactly.
crisis. I don't
Exactly.
have to create
Exactly. It's
one.
like, oh, yeah, everybody is freaking out the same way I have been
Yeah.
forever. And they're all suddenly agoraphobic, just like me. Oh, okay. Welcome to my world,
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah, that was I don't know, it's kind of that was a little nice in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Although I am really ready to be able to not wear a mask anymore.
I
I
know.
My kid is so used to it, like they don't even realize. They're just like, I had to tell them like, okay, you're out of school, you don't have to wear the mask anymore. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot I was wearing it. I'm like, how? I constantly am like, I can't breathe.
Isn't that
I
so
know I
funny
can,
though?
but in
I
my
think our
head.
kids have just adjusted. Like my daughter would walk home from school still wearing it and she'd like sit and watch TV with it. And I'm like, what? And she's like, it's just cozy.
Right.
It's like she calls it her
Right.
mouth blanket. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then, it cracks me up with all these parents like, let them breathe and like, fighting at the school board so that they don't have to wear masks. Like the kids don't care. They really, I
The
think
kids
they
totally
only
don't
care
care.
if we are making it a big deal, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
rest of they're over it.
Yeah.
They've gotten used to it. They've moved on. This is life.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly. It's hard for the parents. I
Yeah.
get it. It's hard for me too. I don't like wearing them.
Yeah.
But yeah. All the kids, I just even and they wear them outside even. I'm like,
Yeah.
aren't you hot? So they're like, no. Well, yeah. Oh, am I still wearing the mask? Oh yeah. Well, I'll just leave it on. I'll forget to put it on otherwise. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
All right, go for you. Good
I
job.
mean, I don't like wearing it, but that's where I get irritated with the people who say like, "Oh, I can't breathe or I can't wear it," because I'm like, okay, listen, I have anxiety, asthma, and sensory processing disorder. If I can
Mhm.
wear it, you can wear it. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
if I can do it, anybody can.
Yes.
Well, what is next for you? Are you working on your next book? Or are you taking a break?
I'm pretty much taking a break.
Yeah.
Although it's not an intentional break. But I just have not had the creativity and the motivation and the inspiration, which is part of why I went, back into treatment for depression. And now I feel like I'm starting to come out of it. Just in I think the last week, I've come out enough that I'm like, oh, it's like breathing again for the first time after being underwater.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden I'm starting to have these ideas of like, well, maybe this would be an interesting, because I always have in my head that I'm going to write another book, but I never know what it's going to be about until it,
Mhm.
it kind of comes to me.
Yeah.
And I always have these ideas, and then the book never ends up being about what I think it's going to be
Yeah.
because my books are about life and I don't get to choose it really. So,
Totally.
so really I'm just kind of going through and just writing notes to myself so that one day, hopefully soon, when I do feel well enough to write, I'll be able to look back and go like, oh, look at all this great material that I couldn't make funny at the time because I wasn't funny at the time.
Yeah. 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 I related so much to when you described your process of writing, and just that, it's difficult. Like I'm not one of those. I have friends that are like, I just can't wait to write my next book, and like I just love writing. Like I feel like it's torture. Like I feel
Oh
like
my God, I
it's
hate
it's such a
it.
slog for me.
It is the worst. And I can't not write. I mean, I have absolutely no ability not to write because I love having written. And if I don't write, it feels like I have like constipation of the head. So I don't have a choice. But yeah, it is such a lonely, terrifying,
Mhm.
it's full of self-doubt.
Yeah.
I delete at least half of what I right?
Yeah.
It's real. Yeah, I have friends who are like, they go on a plane, and then by the time the plane comes down, they're like, I wrote a new novel. And I'm like, I hate you so much. I love
Yeah.
you. I hate you.
Yeah.
Because it
I
takes
don't know that
me,
life.
right? It takes me like, on average, I think it takes about 4 to 5 years for me to write a book. And
Yeah.
and I think, a lot of other people are like, oh yeah, I have a book. I just signed another one. So it's due in 3 months. And I'm like, I wouldn't even be able to do a full chapter in 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's an issue too of trying to kind of refocus your brain and be like, okay, you know what? I actually don't have to work, as fast as everyone else. And you don't have to be as, successful on the outside. And also, well, guess what? Successful on the outside doesn't mean successful on the inside. And
No.
and it's okay to find your own path and your own journey. And yeah, it's hard to do it at the time, because of course at the
Yeah.
time you're like, okay, well, an entire year has passed and I have done nothing. And of course
Yeah.
it's not really nothing. It's like, you survived.
and
Survival is a
and you're
big
living,
thing.
and that's, grist for the mill. Like, you have to
Yes.
live your life in order to have material to write about.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
But I have often thought to myself, like, why did I choose a career that requires my brain to be working at at top performance, when I have a brain that doesn't work at top? Like, this doesn't make sense for me.
Yes.
Why didn't I choose
Yes.
a career where, like, it doesn't, if my brain is going a little haywire, it doesn't matter. Like, just, why
Exactly.
don't I make widgets? I don't know.
Right, right. Yeah, my grandmother worked in a factory her whole life. And I always, in my head, I was always like, I think that would be such a great job,
Yeah.
because it's just like this repetitive, busy work, which my mind, like, I really love when I
Yeah.
have, like, when they send me, the tip-ins and you have to sign it and they're like, we're so sorry, we have to send you 5,000 tip-ins. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is fantastic. I get to sit
Totally.
here and just sign five
Yep.
that like that's 2 days worth of just sitting here
Yeah.
and mindlessly working.
Yes.
And what was funny is my grandmother, I would say, and my mom was always like, you don't want to work in a factory like your grandmother. And I would
Yeah.
always tell my grandmother, I was like, so is it really awful? She was like, it's fantastic. All I do is make sutures all day long. I
Yeah.
just roll up, do the next one, roll them up. It's
Yep.
wonderful. I'm like,
Totally.
thank you, Granny. Thank you.
You don't have to be in a special headspace. You don't,
Right. You
by the
go
end of the
in.
day, no matter what your job has done, where, there's many days as a writer where at the end of the day, you're like, nope, didn't
Yeah,
happen. My work did not
exactly.
happen today.
Exactly. Yeah. She was like, oh no, I got offered, do you want to be a supervisor? Do you want to work in HR? Do you want to? She was like, heck no,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. It was like, oh, okay. All right. So yeah, I'm always like, if nothing else, I can always go and work in a factory. And that actually sounds
Yeah.
okay to me. I
Totally.
don't know. Maybe if I got into a factory, I would be like, I don't like this very much, but it's always seemed kind of nice.
Although selfishly, I think we're all very glad that you chose writing, because it is a gift. It really is. I'm such a fan of your work. I loved this book. I hope people will go buy it. It's everywhere books are sold, but I would recommend they buy it from Nowhere Bookstore.
Oh, thank you so
Your
much.
bookstore, which, I mean, talk really quick about that too. I loved in the end how you were talking about just what a gift the book club has been, and
Oh my
how that's
gosh.
been sustaining both financially and emotionally.
Yeah, so I opened Nowhere Bookshop. I mean, technically, we sort of opened in 2019 with the book club, the Fantastic Strangelings book club, and then we were going to open our doors physically in March of 2020. So that's
Oh,
exactly what you want to do. Is
perfect timing.
right. If you want to make money, you should open an independent bookshop as the pandemic starts. So
Yes.
we actually never opened, because I was like, it's
Yeah.
just too dangerous. And so we just did, curbside and online. And we actually only opened a few weeks ago. So
Yeah.
we were, you know, in the prettiest warehouse ever, basically, for a really long time. But we have the Fantastic Strangelings book club, which is this book club where once a month I pick a weird, lovely book that that may not have gotten enough attention. And I thought, if I can get 100 people to join, that'll help us. Like that'll be like a really big deal because that'll help, pay the rent and all of that. Maybe we won't lose, too much money every month. And we have thousands of members now. And it has literally sustained us. Like it has paid for we have full-time employees and we have, the bookstore and they take care of us and I'm so lucky. And then it also was really helpful for me because during a time when I couldn't do anything because I was so depressed, um, one of the only things that I could do was read.
Yeah.
And instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm such a loser, I can't accomplish anything. Instead, I was like, you know what, though? I have to read these books because this is part of my job
Yeah.
is to find next month's book that's
Yeah.
going to come out. And so it really saved me over and over, not only the books that I read because I was able to escape into different places when I couldn't leave my own house, but also because it feels like every time as I'm reading these books, when I find the right one, I'm like, it feels like I am picking out a Christmas gift for 2,000 of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they all are going to get this amazing book. And then also was really helpful for the authors because so many of them, I mean, it's hard publishing during a pandemic. And so, an extra $2,000, 2,000 books being sold right off the top made
Yeah.
massive difference for
Yeah.
them, for the publishers. I mean,
Totally.
it helped in so many ways.
That's great.
So yeah, I feel so, so lucky that the book club is still going really strong. It's great.
So cool. Well, I will say one thing I'm looking forward to when this pandemic, whenever it's over, is
Yes.
visiting. I
Yes.
follow and my daughter follows your bookshop and she's always saying like, I want to go there. When can we go there?
Right?
So someday.
Oh, someday,
Yes.
someday soon. Texas,
Yes.
get your act together.
Yes. Come on.
Right. It's gonna happen. I will say, at least at our bookstore, we're all vaccinated. Everybody who works there is vaccinated. We require masks. We give out masks for people that
Yeah.
don't have them. So we're, at least so far, knock on wood,
Yeah.
we've been able to stay safe. And
Which is so great.
yes, it is
Yeah.
really, really nice. So, and people, for the most part, are like very kind about it. And I mean, most of the people who come to visit an independent bookstore, even if they don't love masks. If you tell them, could you please?
Yeah.
It's very rare that we get somebody who's
Yeah.
like, I'm an American. You can't make me.
Right.
That's
They're at the gun store, not at the book,
they are.
not
They
at the
are.
independent
They are.
booksellers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I could talk to you all day, honestly. I just enjoy you
Sure.
so much.
This was so much fun. I really enjoyed this. This was
Yeah.
nice. This is
Well, I
the
hope
first.
people will go grab your book, Broken in the Best Possible Way. Also, if you have not read Jenny's work, read all of her books. We're never meeting, or we'll pretend this never happened, and then what was the other one?
Furiously Happy, and
Yes.
You Are Here.
Yes, so good. I've loved all your books. I just devour them when they come out. I'm always happy when you have a new book coming out. So
Thank you so much.
And
You're the
I
best.
listened to the audiobook for this one, and I loved it. I loved hearing your voice. It was really fun.
Oh, you're the best. I have never heard it myself because I don't like to listen to my own voice.
No, I didn't listen to mine either.
Right?
No,
it's
thank
so
you.
awful. Why is
No.
that?
No thanks. But I like listening to yours.
Oh, you're the best.
All right. Well, thank you, friend. I hope I get to see you sometime soon.
I know. One day it's going to happen. It's
Yes.
going to happen. Delta's going to go down. People are going to get vaccinated. People are going to wear masks. It's going to, I can feel it. I can feel it. It's going to be June all over again. We're going to be able to travel. We're going to be able to go out. All fingers crossed.
Yes, please.